Hello, welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. Dale Bromham is an English singer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, and founding member of the hard rock band Stray. The original lineup was Steve Gadd, vocals, Dale on guitar, Gary Lyles bass, and drummer Steve Crutchley. The original band had a nice run from the formation in 1966 until 1977. But that wouldn't be the last we would hear from Stray. Dell would revive the band and play in various lineups well into the new millennium and still playing today. By 2010, the lineup would settle into Pete Dyer vocals, Dell, Stuart Uren bass, and Karl Randall on drums. In 2019, Colin Kempster replaced Stuart on bass. In all, the band has released 12 studio albums and 3 live albums. Sanctuary Records has re-released and remastered the band's 8 studio albums from the 70s with bonus tracks. Stray is still playing live and recording. The latest album, About Time, was released last year. Dale himself has 3 solo albums to date. Well, welcome, Dale.
How you doing, Greg?
Good. Thanks for joining us, and you got your exercise for the day out.
Yes,
out
I was for you people out there. I was explaining to Greg I was doing something very domestic. Just prior to this lovely interview, I was actually cutting the grass, mowing the lawn, as they say, and yeah. But good to speak to you, Greg. Thank you for having me.
All right, thanks for joining us and being here today, Dale. Well, take us back to the beginning. Talk about where you were born.
Where I was born in a little suburb of London called East Acton or Shepherd's Bush. But Acton was kind of well known, I guess, at the time for being the home of The Who. The Who in the 60s were just up the road from us, and they were, if you like, the local heroes. So growing up in West London in the 60s was a great time, actually. I'd jump on the train and go right into central London, and there was the antique markets, and Carnaby Street was just coming. We had the Beatles up the road at Apple, and I'd heard that that they had a shop called the Fool, and it was going to close down, and they were giving away all the clothes and everything. And I ran as fast as I could down there, and they had just closed, and I missed everything. And damn it, if it didn't happen again, I heard the Beatles were playing on the roof, and I ran as fast as I could, and I got there and they finished. So maybe it was something I said, because they didn't want to entertain me at all. But there you go.
You were late. You were late.
Yeah, but I mean, going back to those times you mentioned in the run up, the original lineup of the band. Well, we were about 15 years old at school. In fact, I was thinking the other day, we may well have been 14 years old when myself, Gary, and Steve Gadd decided to put the band together. And you mentioned the drummer, Steve Crutchley. Well, he was only with the band for a few months initially. His mum, which was quite unusual for the time, was a divorced mum, and her new fella had a traditional jazz band.
Oh, okay.
And I'd think it was the time that a lot of middle-aged people of that era thought were rock and roll won't last.
Yeah.
And her new fella she was with had a traditional jazz band, and they were about to do a spot on a TV talent show. So obviously, the call of the spotlights came, and he decided to leave and join his trad jazz band. Now, interestingly enough, it was kind of, well, what are we going to do now? And Steve Gadd was working he had a Saturday job, like a lot of kids did, and it was like a grocery store, and he said to me, "Hey, the other kid who works in the shop with me, he plays drums." Oh yeah, yeah. And he's practicing with his band in a little church hall, not far from where I was living. He's going to be there on Tuesday night. So I went down the road and I crept in, and I saw a young Mr. Richie Cole, playing this beat up kit of drums with a Union Jack over the bass drum and everything. And you'll probably mention later, but I actually put in my book, I've written an autobiography. It was like seeing Keith Moon in front of me. It was like 15 years old. It was the best drum I'd ever seen. And I went back and I said to Steve, he's that guy's brilliant. And he joined the band. And from then on, that was when it really became Stray.
Yeah. So just like that, just you liked, yeah. He passed the audition. Yeah, he passed the audition.
Absolutely. Yeah, he was in the band, but it's a funny thing actually, because when we first started, we were like a pop group of the time. You know, we learned songs that were in the charts. We learned favorite songs of ours, and we all had this like or love really for stuff that was on like Stax label and Motown.
Yeah.
So we used to do kind of versions of that kind of thing, and we ended up playing lots of in the UK we call them the working men's clubs and pubs. And the funny thing was, we got the little band together. None of us could drive. How are we going to get to a gig?
You're too young.
And you always hear these tales of oh, he was the singer because he bought a PA or something like
right.
In this instance, Richie Cole's dad and his uncles had a building company. Guess what? They had a van. But we couldn't drive it. But there were two guys who worked in the shop with Steve and Richie. And when you're 15, someone who's 21 seems old.
Yeah,
but they had a driving license. And those early gigs, they used to drive us out, and we used to get to a pub. You know, I mean, these are two young guys, like 21 years old. They got 4 kids with them, and we used to play in bars and pubs, and we couldn't even have a drink. So it was like 4 Cokes and a beer, please.
Right.
Then I guess when we were about 17 years old, our first management team came along, Peter Amott and Ivan Mann, and they were the ones who kind of, Ivan was very, very much with the visuals, and Pete Amott was part of the team. He was a musician. He was a former drummer, and they kind of were showing us what was happening elsewhere. We were very, if you like, we was in our little sort of box, you know, of pop stuff, and they were showing us everything else what was going on. And interestingly enough, I mean, this is a long story, Greg, but interestingly enough, we didn't have the internet and things like that at the time.
Right.
But I can remember specifically going out to buy a couple of albums that were released on CBS.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, a lot of those albums were American artists. And these 2 albums in particular were called The Rock Machine Turns You On, 1 and 2. I don't know if they ever got out to the States, but they were very influential in Stray's film, because they had, you know, bands like Spirit, The Byrds, Pacific Gas and Electric, all these bands that you would never ever hear on radio in the UK.
Right.
And then in the UK they started doing similar things, putting albums together with, you know, bands, underground bands, English bands. But one thing a lot of them were doing, which is what Peter Amott encouraged us to do, was if we were writing our own material, but it wasn't kind of, they could see that kind of the rock and blues progressive stuff was getting popular, 69, 70. And they were kind of pointing us that way in as well. If you haven't got the songs at the moment, take a cover and give it your own
Right.
feel. And if you remember, once again, back in the over in the States, you had Vanilla Fudge doing this amazing version of "You Keep Me Hanging On." Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh. Right.
And that was kind of almost like a template, really, for I get it. That's what we got to do.
Uh-huh.
And in a funny kind of way, I
Yes.
guess once we started doing that, and we started, well, this is me being selfish. I'm thinking, hang on a minute, I'm writing arrangements for somebody else's songs. I might as
Mhm.
well write arrangements for my own songs.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it was,
Dale,
yeah,
real quick, I wanted to say, what you talked about, the various artists, the compilations, that's
yeah,
how I pick up on a lot of bands. In fact, Stray, that's
yeah.
how it was a transatlantic compilation.
All
And
right,
that's how I first heard Stray. So
yeah.
I pick up on a lot of music that way through those compilations. Yeah. So
Well, that's right, and I think like before the interview started, we were talking off camera.
mhm.
That's kind of in a way how we've had the longevity, because we've been featured on, as well as our own material, we've been featured on quite a few sampler CDs and things over the years, with
Right.
associations with people, that you might pick up an album. Oh, it's got something here by, you know, Iron Maiden or somebody. I wonder what that is. So you buy the album for somebody else and
Uh-huh.
find someone else,
Uh-huh.
and it kind of works. And I'm still here to tell the tale, Greg.
Yes, thankfully, yes. Uh, well, talk a little bit about some of the what else was going on around you, the music scene, when you guys were, first playing live gigs and that kind of thing, and as far as other influences that came into play, other music.
I guess. Well, I mean, I was always, as I said before, I was always a big fan of Motown music, and the Beatles as well. And it wasn't so much at the time. I wasn't so aware of what happened in the 70s onwards, genres and being put in boxes, because I
Yeah.
mean, my I had three older brothers who were all into music, and my dad was into music. My next brother to me did have a band, but consequently, we had a lot of music on in our house,
Mhm.
everything, and there wasn't uh, any sort of, as I used the word genre before, that was it was all, if it's good music, it's good music,
Yeah.
and we were listening. I was brought up. Interestingly enough, I was reading something that Paul McCartney once said, and I kind of get the way he might write what might be termed a silly song like Maxwell Silver Hammer,
Uh-huh.
and then do Helter Skelter, because he said that in his household as well, and I thought I can connect with that. He would have like um, the old musicals, you know,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
being played.
Right.
We had trad jazz being played. We had blues in the house. We had soul. We had
Yeah.
everything. But the bottom line is, and this is what I do. I do acoustic uh, sessions over here, shows or other, and I'm I'm proud to say that I think I can quite possibly play about 95% of all my songs I've ever written on an acoustic guitar or a piano, because that's how they started. It
Yeah.
wasn't a riff.
Yeah.
And I think the thing with Stray is, which sometimes became a little bit of a noose around our neck, because you used to come and see Stray early, particularly early live, and it was a four-piece hard rock band, and then you
Uh-huh.
get the album home, and there'd be something acoustic on it, or there's something with strings, or something
Uh-huh.
pretty.
Yeah.
Now, you weren't supposed to do that. That wasn't the rule. No, you're a rock band. You've got to do it. What's this?
Yeah.
So we used
Yeah.
to confuse people like hell. What's this? So, and it's funny because even now, all those years later, I actually get fans come up who've been with the band for all these years and say to me, "Do you know what? I wasn't sure about that album and those couple of songs, but as I've got older, I love them."
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
I think that's the thing with us. It was always about the song.
Yeah.
not what the riff was like or whatever. It was all about the song, and I think, you know, songs will go on, not necessarily mine, but just the ones that hang around the most are going to be the good songs.
The longevity.
Lennon McCartney, Holland Dozier, Holland.
Right.
They're the people I brought up on, and I wanted to be Lennon McCartney Bromham, but they wouldn't have me.
Right. Well, what you said, what we talked about before we started was about the longevity and about, you know, people today or younger people going back and listening to the music from the 60s and 70s, you know, and appreciating it, because good music is gonna travel, you know, and people will find it one way or another, you know. So
yeah, I mean, I guess to be honest with you, and not wishing to name drop, but it is kind of relevant to what you're saying and what we're talking about. I noticed it more in about 1990. There was a bit of a void where it felt like nothing much was happening, and then Iron Maiden recorded All in Your Mind, which was arguably probably the best known Stray tune of that early era, and they put it as on the B side of a single, Holy Smoke. Well, that went to #1 in the charts over here. And then it was also included on one of their albums called Best of B-Sides or something. And I mean, I got to know all the guys in Maiden, particularly become friends with Steve Harris. And he was saying that, you know, he always used to come and see Stray, you know, when he was first starting. And he always wanted to do that. And his three favorite bands were Stray, UFO, and Iron Maiden, and Golden Earring.
Oh, and I love UFO. I love UFO.
Well, that you see, and what he did was almost like a little tribute salute. Record a song of each of his three favorite bands. Now, as I say, going back to that time, it's what we were saying. You know, some of these kids must have picked up this thing. Well, who's Stray then? Who are they? You know.
Yeah.
And over the years, I mean, we were very fortunate. We ended up doing European tour with Iron Maiden in 2003. You know, and I was getting a little bit worried, because I know the Iron Maiden audiences can be very, they can be either very receptive or not very receptive. And generally speaking, at the time, they're not normally too receptive, because they can't wait. We want to see Maiden. But I have to say, in all modesty, Greg, we went down a storm everywhere we played. Went down really well, and even now, you know, going like 30 years on or whatever it is, we're still getting people turn up with Iron Maiden t-shirts. Yeah. And that's the way that's diversified. So, you know,
that's right. That's right.
But what we were saying, it's just sometimes you stumble across something completely by accident. You know.
Yeah. I like to go, you know, to find the roots of music. I like to find out, you know, original songwriters, original bands, you know, go back and listen and compare sometimes. Sometimes I like it, sometimes, you know, not so much. But that's how you find out, you know, about the musical trees, you know, and the lineage. Well, going back to the beginning, you originally the Stray, and then you just became a Stray. You guys signed to Transatlantic. Thought that was kind of an odd pairing, because Transatlantic was more of a folk label.
Absolutely right. They were. I'm not quite sure how that happened. I know our management at the time, they were looking for a deal, and I think it's like everything else. It was those days. Record label Transatlantic, I think they were trying to jump on what was becoming, as I said before, around 69, 70, because they would have been having discussions with Transatlantic towards the end of 69. Transatlantic wanted to get into what was happening with, if you like, the up and coming prog rock scene and blues scene. So
you wanted to kind of diversify a little bit.
And at that time there were other labels that were doing the same thing, you know, major labels that were having a subsidiary label. You know, I can't remember all the names now, but Chrysalis, I remember, springs to mind were being, and Charisma.
Yeah. With
Those
early
labels back,
Genesis.
yeah, but back at that time, it was, and I think basically Transatlantic wanted a piece of the pie. You know,
Right.
they were probably thinking that, you know, the folk music thing is not going to last too much longer, or, you know, maybe it doesn't have the longevity that other things have. So they went with it, and consequently, our managers decided at that time to go with Transatlantic. I did love the design of their label.
Yeah.
Thought that
Yeah,
was
I did
really,
too.
I
I
thought that
do.
was really
I do.
cool. That.
I do too. Very,
Yeah, and
very
also,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
and also the name Transatlantic sounds worldwide, all
It
encompassing.
does.
You know, and when you're 18 years old and you get signed up by a record label, it doesn't really matter what label. It could be on the Heinz label. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? Or the Cross and
Yeah.
Blackwell label. You know, but it was, you know, and it was kind of apparent after. I mean, in this country, it's difficult to describe it unless, and you know, you had to be there, as the old saying goes. But
Right.
no, but the album came out. The first album came out in 1970, and then we had the second album,
Yeah.
Suicide, came out,
Yeah. Well,
and then
I wanted to ask you about the first album. Do you recall the recording sessions for the
yes,
first?
yeah, I do, and
Yeah.
it's strange as well. If I smell coffee,
Hmm.
it reminds me of Sound Technique Studio in Chelsea, in London.
It takes you back. Yeah.
It does. It the smell of something, you know. It's that,
Uh-huh.
and it was very much, if you like, doing a day job, because
Okay.
we we used to go in, I think, about 10 o'clock in the morning and record till about 5, and we did that for about a week, I suppose, like Monday to Friday,
Uh-huh.
and then the album was mixed and produced by Hugh Murphy, who went on to record people like Jerry Rafferty and people like
Oh,
this,
yeah.
and Jerry Boys, who was the engineer. So we didn't really have an awful lot of say in what it was going to sound like. But I do recall, and I think it's something to do with the way we recorded, and also because our inexperience had something to do with it. But unless I'm mistaken, when we recorded the album, we very much recorded live in the studio. Guitar, bass, and drums, and Steve lead singing. And I think some of the songs I do recall him standing with a mic, but we didn't use that vocal, you know. So we were basically playing live, and then we go back and do the vocals afterwards, and also any overdubs, like not really the lead guitar, because it was played live. If it might needed a rhythm guitar, or I think I played piano on a couple of them on the first album.
Hmm.
But it was pretty much recorded live, and I think, in a funny kind of way, that was why we made the album so quickly,
Okay.
because not only we used to rehearse regularly, and although we were only 18 years old, we were gigging so much. There were so many venues to play,
Yeah.
and we could just plug in. We were on autopilot, you know,
Mhm.
and it was like everything was done in like second or third take. You know,
Yes.
one for a run through,
Uh-huh.
2 for the show, 3 to get ready and go. But
Go, go.
yeah, but that was kind of it. It was a very quick process. The second album, Suicide, when we did that one, I suppose we were getting a bit cocky. Oh, we're getting the hang of this now. So and also because the first one sold very well, and at the time, you know, as I said, you had to be there. Really, it was felt in the music business that Stray were going to be the next big thing. You know, they're going to be the next Led Zeppelin, the next Free, that kind of thing. So we were kind of waiting for that to happen, and then Suicide came out, and that sold really well, but nothing quite happened. And then we went to do the third album, which was called Saturday Morning Pictures, and we were really pleased with that album. Everything at the time was going great. We were playing sold out shows everywhere, and we, you know, I'm not being conceited or anything. It's just at the time we thought this is the one.
Yeah, yeah.
And when it didn't happen, we sort of, what happened there then? And
Right.
of course, we were still only like 20 years old or whatever at the time,
Yeah.
and we're thinking, well, it's not us.
It can't be you.
It
No.
must be the label. It must be the management. And not long after that, we got put on a tour with a band called the Groundhogs, and they were managed by a guy called Wilf Pine, who was to do with a big management company called Worldwide Artists. And they had the Groundhogs, they had Yes, they had Black Sabbath, and we thought they want us. This is going to be the one. But you know, that is a very long story, and it's history will tell you it didn't happen quite the way we expected.
Right. Well,
but that's all a life's rich tapestry, as they say. You don't get a rehearsal in life.
That's right. That's right. You know, I wanted to go back and just mention from your 70s releases some of the tracks that I enjoy and kind of get your input or your recollections, inspiration, what have you for those. And off of the first album, and I know these are three biggies, that a lot of fans enjoy too, as well as All in Your Mind, Around the World in 80 Days, and Time Machine. Those three are top tracks.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, I think I had it in my head that perhaps it might have been maybe a concept album, because that was the hip thing to do. And like Around the World in 80 Days and Time Machine had this kind of travel thing to it. And but the band wrote, we had so many songs that was the thing. I'd had a conversation with Steve Gadd not so long ago, and I said, I wonder how it came about that those songs that were on the album were the ones we chose, because I then started reeling off, because fortunately my memory is still good. I then started reeling off all these other songs, original songs that we were doing in the set at the time that we never used. They just lost in space, should we say. But no, I don't really know how it came about. All in Your Mind was from a jam session we had. We used to rehearse in a school hall, and we just started playing something, and the main riff on that is actually the 1812 Overture.
I knew it sounded familiar. Yes.
Well, it was but nobody ever sussed it.
No, not until now.
It was just a jam. It was just a jam. And I just think while we were in the school hall, we started scribbling words down. I think Steve kept singing, "Oh, it's all in your mind" or something, and we kept it. And that one, I still play it live now. Around the World in 80 Days, we never played live. And it's only in recent years that I have played it live. I do, as I said to you earlier,
acoustic,
it's a song, so I can sit and play it to you, and it doesn't require lots of stuff.
Bare bones.
So I mean, there was no that. Well, that's the thing with any Stray album we had or we recorded, we never had a plan. And I think a lot of bands, by what I can gather, always have a plan, a game. This is what we're going to do. But I write the songs, or in later days, Steve and I wrote some songs together, and we just brought them along. And if all four of us liked the song and it sounded okay, we never actually thought, well, we can't do that because someone might not like it. If we liked it, that was it. And I think, once again, that was how, because of all four of us liked all different types of music. It wasn't just me. And so we were all on the same wavelength as far as that's concerned. but there was no plan, and it's just how the record turned out. And you could argue that maybe that's what made Stray different from the rest.
Yeah, set you apart. Yeah,
You know,
it could be. Well, let me ask you, who designed the logo, the Stray logo?
do you know? I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. It's probably someone who's vanished into obscurity, was working for a design team that was
Okay.
employed by Transatlantic. You know,
Okay.
I don't, but it's kind of so recognizable.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
it is.
you know, you barely have to read it before you know who it is. You know,
Right, right.
and the good thing is, if you've got the original vinyl album,
Hmm.
because as you may know, that's a cutout, like a stencil.
Uh-huh, right. Yeah, yeah.
So people used to put the albums in their rack with all the rest of the albums, and they
Uh-huh.
used to get ripped
Yeah.
unless you had
Right.
a polythene cover on it. Now,
Uh,
you, I've seen them on eBay
mhm.
in pristine condition for a couple of
Yeah,
$100 now.
yeah.
You know,
Right. Isn't that
an
something?
original 1970 album in pristine
Well,
condition, couple of
yeah.
$100.
Well, Dale, I'll have to mark you 1 point for stumping you on that question. I'll have you knock you 1 point for that.
Oh,
Let's keep up
how am I going
keep
to
up the
sleep?
good
How
work.
am I going to sleep at night?
No. Well, I want to mention going to the second album, Suicide. I like Son of the Father.
Oh
But
yeah,
I know in messaging you before we did this, my favorite is Dearest Eloise. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah. Great song. Great song.
yeah. It is.
Yeah.
It is indeed. Yeah, that was um, Steve Gadd wrote that one, and
Uh,
he. It's funny because he never all the time he didn't always have a lot of self-confidence, and if I'd have been mercenary, I would have said to him, "Oh no, you should do this as well," and I'd get 50% of his songwriting royalties. But
yeah.
I'm just such a good guy, Greg, and I'm not.
Right.
I've never been greedy, but no, I can remember he played that to me, and he always used to say, "What do you think? What do you think?" You know, waiting, and I think waiting for me to give him some kind of input, because I'm not blowing my own trumpet or anything. I think he kind of looked to me to be, well, you're the main writer. I've come up with this. What do you think? You know, and with that one, I said, it's fine. You don't need anything else. We just go and do it. My sort of contribution to it, if anything, was with the arrangement, really, you know, taking it away slightly from the more rocky thing, because he was just playing it to me, just strumming on an acoustic guitar. And you know, I think that one, I remember going in the studio and we had the piano there, and we had a electric harpsichord. I think,
Right.
whoa, this is like ding 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 ding. Uh,
Right.
and also they were in the studio at the time. Um, it's on Son of the Father as well as Dearest Eloise. There's what was a new innovation, the Mellotron.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I love the Mellotron.
Well, there was a Mellotron was in a studio along with this board, so like everything went on it. If there had been a
Uh-huh.
kitchen sink there, that would have been it. But I just had to play it, and I was told that the Mellotron that's in the studio was the one that the Beatles had up the road
Ah,
uh,
really?
used.
Okay.
And of course, when I was told that, I had to sit down and play the intro for Strawberry Fields Forever. So, well,
Yeah.
if they can do it, I can do it too. So I know. So yeah, the Dearest Louise, lovely, lovely tune. And Hugh Murphy actually, who produced that album as well. I
Uh-huh.
said to him, "There's the little guitar lines on there."
Uh-huh.
I said to him, you know, I'm being completely honest with you. I said to him at the time, I said, I want to get that kind of feel that the Beatles had on something.
Yeah.
And
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I want to get, I said to him, I want to be Eric or George doing that
Uh-huh.
there.
Yes.
That's the
Yeah.
sound I'm after, you know. So, um, off came the distortion,
Uh-huh.
turned the 100-watt amp down to about 10, and
Uh-huh.
just sweet sounds.
You know, something is, speaking of that, that's probably one of my top Beatles songs, if not my favorite. It's
Yeah,
a shame they didn't let George write more songs,
yeah.
he got his one per album or whatever it was, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's a
and it,
shame.
and it was always a good one. Going
Yeah,
right,
it was.
going back to Taxman and all that. Yeah,
It was, but yeah, I also like the harpsichord, and that comes up a little later on a couple other songs on a later album. But I wanted to from '73's Mudanzas, Mudanzas,
Mudanzas. Yeah, it's a Spanish word.
Mudanzas,
Yeah,
Mudanzas. Yeah.
that's it. It's a Spanish word. It means to move or to change,
Ah,
and that
okay.
was our new manager at the time. They thought
Yeah.
that would be a good idea because I I always
Yeah.
remember we was kind of recording the music first. Now they put us on the tour with the Groundhogs to
Uh-huh.
see how we would fare in, like, with the big audiences, and we went down really well. And I can always remember once he'd heard all the demos, if you like, for the songs. I can always remember Wolf Pine, his name was. He was kind of a bit of a tough guy, and he said, and he was managing Black Sabbath at the time, co-managing him with a guy called Pat Meehan, and he said, I remember he turned around and said to me, we played the album through after we recorded it, that was it, and he said to me, he said, you know what? He said, I thought I'd signed up the new Black Sabbath. He said, but I think I've signed up the new Beatles.
Oh,
So
wow.
for me, you can
Yeah,
imagine what that was such a compliment,
that was a compliment. Yeah.
because I mean, he thought he was going to get like a hard rock quartet, doing
Uh,
pretty much what Black Sabbath did. And of course, the opening track was "Come On Over," which is,
yes.
and I believe it's on there and all that. And I actually said, I'd like some string orchestration on that, and my thing, I wanted to get George Martin,
Uh-huh.
get,
Uh-huh.
get his input, sort of thing. And that was an interesting fact because on I Believe It, for example, I kind of very much, when I write a song, it's a funny thing with this brain of mine. It's almost like I get the whole thing in my head. I get the video and everything. And I knew that it was kind of very orchestrated because the bass line on it was
Yeah.
very much what a cello would play. It's got that
Uh-huh.
dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
So I said about the orchestration, and Wolf Pine said to me, I've got this new young arranger.
Uh-huh.
Um, his name is Andrew Powell. I said, oh yeah, yeah. He said, yeah, he's just been working on a new band called Cockney Rebel. I
Uh-huh.
said, oh,
Yeah.
hang on a minute.
Yeah.
And the title slips on mine now as we're speaking.
Uh-huh.
Sebastian. That was it.
Sebastian.
That
Sebastian.
yeah,
Yeah.
that first track. I said that's one of my favorite
Uh-huh.
records at the moment.
Yeah.
I love all the arrangement. He said, well, he's the guy who did it, and
Uh-huh.
so got together with Andrew, and he did the string arrangements on I Believe It and Come On Over, and
Yeah.
you know, I Believe It. He just nailed it. It's exactly what I wanted. I
Yeah.
think the only criticism most people have about that album is I think Wolf Pine, our manager, wanted to make a bit of a name for himself as a producer.
Mhm.
And I think what actually happened was, and I'm not saying anything behind his back because we spoke about it in years after. Um, the production was so big it almost drowned out the band.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's a track on there
Yeah.
called "Pretty Thing," which none of us wanted the brass on it.
Uh-huh.
That was probably the closest thing we had to Black Sabbath at the time.
Uh-huh.
And all of a sudden we've got it's like four monkeys on the brass doing it in a funfair, and I thought, no, that's not right, but we weren't making the decisions at the time on that kind of thing, so
Yeah.
that went
Well,
by.
you hit on it. And when I read about, you liking Sebastian, that's my favorite Cockney Rebel song of
Me
all
too.
time.
Me
Yeah.
too.
It is. I
and,
love it
and
how it begins with the piano. You know,
it's
just
it's beautiful.
oh,
It's beautiful.
it is a beautiful song,
And,
and
and,
it's
and
sad.
the,
It's sad about his Steve's passing
well, yeah,
recently. Yeah,
this is fun. This is kind of
yeah,
very typical
yeah.
of what I say to a lot of youngsters, particularly in who go to gigs, who might be, would be musicians, got little bands together. I say
Mhm.
to them, you never know who's in the audience,
Yeah.
because over the years I've met so many people, well-known people who say, "Oh, we used to come and see you,"
Uh-huh.
and Steve Harley was one of them.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
I did a show a few years ago, and the odd thing is that a lot of my peers, we never used to meet each other much back in the 70s because we were always working at different venues. In the UK, particularly, there are more various artist festivals than there ever used to be, spread over
yeah.
2 or 3 days. And I did a festival a few years ago, and our dressing room was next door to Cockney Rebels' dressing room. And I've walked from side stage going back to the dressing room, and Steve Harley walks out of his room, and we virtually walk straight into each other. And he went, "Hi there," and he went, "Oh, you're Del Bromham from Stray." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, I used to come and see you at the Greyhound in Croydon in 1970, 71." He said, "Me and my mates, we used to run down the front, and we used to sit cross-legged, and I used to be over your side there and sit up and watch you play." And it's sort of mind-blowing, really. And that's what I say to so many people. If you imagine, like, I've got bloody, Steve Harris or the members of Iron Maiden in the audience, but they're not famous yet.
Right,
But,
right.
and I just say, you never know who's in the audience. You never know who's in the audience. And what
Yeah,
I remember of Steve was, and what everyone in the business who knows Steve Harley has said to me, was that he was a lovely guy.
yeah.
Taken way too soon.
Yes, yes, way too soon. Yeah. Well, it's very interesting, like you said, about that mutual respect too, that you
Mm,
find. You know, somebody there that was before they became big, he was watching you,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
in turn, you appreciate his output and their
yeah,
music.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Which is good because you don't have to fake it. So, oh
Right.
yeah, you were great. You were great. Oh,
Yeah. Well, the song "Move It" from the album of the same name,
Mm.
that's a great rock and roll track. Great rock and roll track, I think.
That once again was Wilf Pine, our manager's idea.
Uh,
Um, he was saying that as much as he liked some of our sweeter songs,
uh,
he wanted something rocky that they could put out as a hit single. And he just had this wild idea that this song, I don't know if you know the history of it, but it was recorded by a well-known artist in the UK called Cliff Richard.
okay, okay.
It's a Cliff Richard record, which goes back to about 1958, 59.
Okay.
I haven't got a guitar handy here because if I did, it was pretty much dun 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 dun. Well, come on, pretty baby, let's move it and a groove it.
Yes, yes, yes.
So it was very much like that, and
Right.
it's,
I know.
there's a funny story about that record. I mean, we just decided we kind of looked at each other at the suggestion, and we thought, oh, okay, we'll go with it, and we just went down to our rehearsal studio and just jammed it, And
Yeah.
the riff that I do in that is da 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 da.
Uh,
Well, the original one was by, you probably heard of the Shadows.
Shadows, yeah, the backing
Well,
band for Cliff. Yeah.
well, they were the backing band for Cliff. You see,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
well, their version of that, because they were the band on Move
Uh-huh.
It.
Uh-huh.
So Hank Marvin was doing
Hank
da da
Marvin.
da 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 da, and it was all
Uh-huh.
quick stuff, and,
Yeah.
and we just slowed it right down.
See?
Now, it was composed by a well-known British songwriter called Ian Samwell.
Uh-huh.
And now, bear in mind, this was the 70s, and we didn't really have the internet or anything like that. So to get the lyrics off of it, you had the record, the stylus on the record. Come on, pretty,
Yeah, over
come
and
on,
over.
pretty baby. Let's move. It got to the second verse, and I couldn't understand what Cliff Richard was singing.
Mhm.
It was nothing on. What? So I suppose being pre-punk,
Uh-huh.
like,
Yeah.
well, I wrote down, and Steve sang what I thought were the lyrics, which was, as bad as that calypso that gets nothing on,
Yeah.
real
Yeah.
country music that just drives along. I thought that was correct.
Yeah.
When I met Ian Samwell, who wrote the song, very polite English chap. Hey, by the way, I like the way you changed the lyric to make it more modern. I said, yeah. He said, yeah. He said, and apparently, instead of where I wrote, as bad as that calypso that gets nothing on, the real lyric is sambas and calypso that gets nothing on. But he liked it, so the songwriter approved my but that was quite funny. But that was weird as well. I mean, you know, bearing in mind that I said to you about listening to some of the old records when I was growing up as a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have been even in my primary school then when that first came out, and then move on a few years later, and you're actually sitting with the guy who wrote this record that used to be playing on your turntable on your mum and dad's house, you know, which is quite surreal. And I said to you earlier about the when you're 15, 16 years old and you've got a record on, a sampler record, and these people like the Birds are on your record player, you think as a 15, 16-year-old, wow, I'm never going to meet people like that. 5 years later, that 15-year-old met the Birds. I played with Spirit. I played with Pacific Gas and Electric, all these people that I said. And when you're a kid, you think, you know, you put a record of somebody, you think, I'm never going to see these people, you know.
Right, right.
And a few years ago, you know, I got to meet and become friends with Leslie West.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I think to myself,
Yeah.
and I have to keep looking back to myself, and I'm going to do a really sad plug here. But in my book,
that's all right. That's all
Rock
right.
and Roll, in my book, I actually put that in there, and it's almost a recurring theme where if you'd have told this 15-year-old kid from London that one day he's going to work with so and so, he's going to meet that person, he's going to write a song with so and so, you could, you know,
well,
if I could be a fly on the wall and jump back in time and say,
you know,
hey,
I
Dale,
have,
you know what, in 19 something, you're going to meet,
Yeah, you know, I have to relate it to myself doing these interviews. I mean, if you know, what, 4 years ago, maybe, I would have never imagined I could be talking to people like yourself, you know, and it's doing it, you know. A lot of times you think musicians, you know, are a different sort. They're entertainers, they're personas. You can't approach them. You can't. They're idols a lot of times, you know. So I can't go and talk to this guy. No. What would I say, you know? But then you just find out that they're human beings, you know, just like everybody else. You know,
I think it's when we're talking about PCs and internet. It's made the world a smaller place and made people much more connectable. You know,
right.
You know, as I say, back in the 60s and 70s, when I was looking at these people, the actual thought they were just you couldn't reach them, you couldn't touch them. You know, all you had was that album. That's all you had, you know, and that's what you had. To actually think that I might share a stage with them, become friends with any of them. You know, it's a very, I guess, of all the jobs I could have been doing, it's a very privileged place.
Very much.
You know, and it has nothing to do. It's the thing. I think the world is so so full of if you're going to do something, it has to be about the money.
Yeah.
What's in it for you?
Right.
But those things that I talk about in my book, they're priceless. You can't put a price on them.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? The actual price of, one day I'm going to meet somebody, or one day you can't put a price on that. It's just the wonderful, if you're lucky, it's the wonderful things that happen to you in life,
Right. Right.
Priceless.
Yeah. Yes, they are. You hit it right, the nail on the head. You really did. And even going to concerts before, a lot of my friends would be like, "Oh, I can't go up and talk to them. After the show, I can't go to," and I would be the one that would go up and talk. And I would be like, "What's the big deal?"
I think these days actually those barriers are broken down a lot. And I think I mean, this sounds really corny, but when in the 70s, when we were first sort of going up, our managers, and it was quite commonplace. They didn't want it in the media or fans to know that perhaps one of us had a girlfriend or one of us was married, because it might damage the reputation. You might stop some of the girl fans wanting to follow the band. Just really odd, things that are odd now. And where these days as well, most musicians I know, whether you've got merchandise or whether you haven't, you maybe do a meet and greet afterwards and go out and say hello and sign a few albums, which I obviously, having quite a few albums around, I have to make sure I've got the Sharpies ready,
Yeah, that's right.
But and I think those barriers are broken down now, and I think people are interested to hear the stories, which is going back to the book again. That's partly why I wrote the book, because different people were asking me about my stories, but equally I was interested in their stories they were telling me.
Yeah.
You were talking earlier about younger fans picking up on us, and it's funny how certain things in life you remember things specifically. And I remember a few years ago playing a show, and I was out at the merch desk signing stuff, and there were 3 young guys there. I guess they were 18, 19, 20 years old. No disrespect, but they looked like they were heavy rock fans. The leather jackets, the long hair,
Yeah.
And I can't remember exactly how the conversation went, but I wasn't being facetious or anything like this. I was just sort of saying to them, "Oh, it's great you've come along to see Stray." And I can't remember what I said exactly, but my implication was, "Is this a bit old fashioned for you? Who you really into?" I can remember they kind of looked at each other and looked at me almost in disgust. "No, we love Stray. We love all bands like that. Deep Purple, Black Sabbath." And they were listing bands from the 70s, and I guess it was kind of like me listing, I don't know, Glenn Miller,
Yeah.
it just seemed sort of, whoa, okay. And I think that's the other thing that's happened as years have gone on. Music has it'll hit a wider audience.
Right.
Once upon a time, you could only listen to something from a certain category. That genre thing again.
And a lot of the time, what you just said, a lot of the time had to do with youth. You didn't want to mention somebody like Glenn Miller that your friends would have said, look down on you. It's that peer pressure.
You know what?
But when you get older, it doesn't matter.
I can remember being in Germany in about 1970, 71, and we had a journalist from a rock magazine. And I'm sure this is what happened, because it almost seems like one of those things from a comedy sketch. But I can remember it was almost like the 4 of us were kind of in a line, and I wonder if you could tell me what bands you're listening to now, and you just knew that he wanted you to say, the bands that were around at the time, that those three young guys 50 years later were relating to me. When they got to me, it was, and who are you listening to at home today? What are you listening to? I said, well, you know, I like Marvin Gaye, and I like Otis Redding, and Al Green, Donny Hathaway, and it was almost like, next, and he went to the next man, because I wasn't giving him the heavy rock answer that he expected.
What he wanted. What he wanted. Yeah.
But you're right. Yeah, you couldn't say it, but I had to say it. It's what you asked me what I'm listening to. That's what I had at home. You know. But there you go.
Well, I just think that makes you more well-rounded, well-versed. You know, when you have a broader range of influences. You know.
Well,
But
like I said before, it's all about the song. It's not the genre; it's the song.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Well, you can tell me anytime. Just you got to read the book. Any of these questions, if you don't want to, you know, go into them, you can just say, "Hey, you got to read the book."
No, I like a chat.
Okay. You did mention managers, and you had your share. This one, I mean, I want to hear about Charlie Cray.
Okay.
The brother of the Cray twins, and most people are familiar with who the Cray twins were.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
How long you got? Well, it can go deeper than that, actually, because we were loosely involved with the mafia in America before.
Okay.
Okay. And Wilf Pine, who was our manager, as I said before, was signed with Worldwide Artists. Now, we didn't know it at the time, but Worldwide Artists had been sold out, so they were no more. So all of a sudden, the money had gone.
Okay.
And our money was going somewhere. We didn't know where, but because of connections, we didn't like to ask too many questions.
Okay, right.
Because
right.
I did value my fingers, you see.
Yeah.
But Wilf was trying to get us a new management deal, trying to alleviate some of the pressure from himself. And he used to work for a very famous manager who had a similar reputation. His name was Don Arden, who's Sharon Osbourne's father.
Yes. Yes.
So he introduced me to, as it was, Jet Records. And the hope was that originally it was Wilf was going to join up with Don's son, David Arden, Sharon's brother.
Okay.
And they were going to co-manage Stray. For one reason or another, I don't know why it didn't happen. And then I found that Wilf was going out to the States, USA more, to meet his friends in sharp Italian suits, violin cases. And so there was at that time I met Sharon, actually. Sharon, not Osbourne, but Sharon Arden, who I saw her on TV recently, and I said to my partner Annie, I said, you know, I don't recognise her as the person I used to know, because when I used to know Sharon, she was like the meek and mild little Jewish girl in the Laura Ashley print dresses, you know. Oh, hello, Del. How are you? You know, very, very completely different. But anyhow, I digress. So I attended the offices of Jet Records and to meet Don Arden on several occasions. And each time I'd been down there, for one reason or another, the meeting was cancelled. So I left. On this particular occasion, I've gone down there, and one of the A&R guys at Jet said to me, "Oh, you never guess who's coming here today?" I said, "Who's that?" So he said, "Oh, Charlie Cray." I went, "You're joking. What's he doing here?" He's just been released from one of Her Majesty's hotels. if you follow my drift. And he's written a book and he's looking for a deal. So I went, "Oh, okay." Now, if you can picture this scene, I guess I'm about mid-20s, I guess, 24 years old or something. And the sort of the legend, probably not the right word, of the Crays as a family is was quite something, you know.
Yeah.
It got fear in the hearts of the strongest man, basically.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting on this leather couch, waiting for my meeting with Don Arden, who was also had a reputation. When in through the door comes Charlie Cray, and he sits on the other leather settee right opposite me, and it's that very much nervous. All right, yeah, fine.
Uh-huh. Right.
What should we talk about? You know, what talk about the weather? And he kind of broke the ice, and it was kind of, what are you doing here then? What are you doing here then, mate? I said, oh, I'm hopefully trying to get a deal from Don Arden for the band. What, you got a band? Yeah, my band. What's the band called? Stray. Oh yeah. So I'd cut a very long story short. We've been sitting there for quite some time, and he said, "How long you been here, then, son or boy, whatever you call it?" I said, "Oh, well, I've been here probably about an hour and a half now." I said, "But it's not the first time. It's about the third or fourth time I've been down for a meeting. It's been cancelled." And I remember he turned around and looked at me straight in the eye and said, "Do you know what?" He said, "I don't like being given a runaround. Do you?" I went, "Well, no, of course I'm going to disagree with Charlie Cray, aren't I?" I said, "No." He said, "I know people in the music business." He said, "I think we should have a meet." I went, "Okay." I'm thinking, Charlie Cray wants to have a meeting with me, with people in the music business. Now, can you imagine? I don't know if you can imagine this. It's almost like I've written it in the book, the story, because I'm thinking I've got to write it down because people think I've made it up, but it's honest truth. And this is the other surreal thing. At the time, you know, the Stray had been doing quite well, and it doesn't seem much these days, but I had a brand new car at the time, which was what was called a Mini Clubman, and it was white with the alloy wheels on it, with all the John Player markings on it. It looked really the business. But it's only a small car. And I was living in West London, and Charlie's family live in East London.
East, yeah.
Complete opposite side of London. So he said to me, "How did you get here then, Del?" I said, "Oh, I came in my car." He said, "Oh, you're not going anywhere near Bethnal Green, are you? Give me a lift." How can I say no to Charlie Cray?
Yeah.
No, I'm going the opposite way. So I've gone. So I've now, only having only met Mr. Charlie Cray, who was like almost like a fictitious character, is now sitting in the front of my car. Yeah. I'm driving through London with Charlie Cray on the front seat of my car, thinking nobody will believe this. No one is going to believe that I've got Charlie Cray in my car. And I drop him off at his mum's house. His mum is the famous Vi Cray, mother of the Cray twins. And was true to his word, actually. He introduced me to someone who became quite relevant to things for the future. Was a guy called Laurie O'Leary. And now Laurie O'Leary was in the music business. Alfie, his brother, was Eric Clapton's tour manager.
Okay.
And he also ran a very famous club called the Speakeasy in London.
Heard of it.
But he was in the music business. He had a lot of contacts. He was looking after the business interests of Steve Marriott at the time, you know, from the Small Faces and Humble Pie. That's how I got to meet Steve, through him. And somehow through this meeting, they thought what a great idea it would be if Charlie was to manage Stray. Now, Charlie knew nothing about managing rock bands, but he was in the music business. People don't know this. In the late 50s, early 60s, and he represented predominantly American acts that came over. Their business, for example, Judy Garland, he was her UK representative.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Actors like George Raft, the old American actor, and he knew all these people, all the Rat Pack people, the Sinatras, and all this sort of people. But this is my opinion, and this is what I've heard from other people, because I did get to know him very well. And I remember when we went away on tour, he said, give your wife my phone number. If she needs anything while I'm away, just phone me and I'm there. And he true to his word, he would have helped you out. And but the story I heard was that excuse me, just have a little drink here.
Sure.
The story I heard that he was, the twins, Reggie and Ronnie, were having, shall we say, a business meeting in his club. And at the time, the establishment in the UK wanted them all off the street. They didn't want a Cray. So Charlie didn't get as long a sentence as the twins because he was kind of an accessory. And they put him away for having sort of dubious practices on his premises, basically.
Yeah, right.
But what actually happened with the band, going back to the management, was that agents and promoters were scared of us. They didn't want to get involved with Stray because they were with Charlie Cray, and we might get our legs broken.
Yeah.
So the whole thing backfired, and Charlie very graciously sort of said, I'm really sorry, guys, that this isn't working. We said, well, we didn't want to say so, but it isn't. And but that was basically Charlie's involvement. It was as much a publicity stunt as anything else, because we went from being nothing to we were on the top kind of news business program on TV at that time. Was a program called Nationwide. It was on every night. It had millions of viewers. Charlie Cray is managing this new young rock band called Stray. So we hit that. We hit the front pages of all the big daily papers. Cray for Stray, and all the usual corny lines. And but it was a great idea. But it just shows you not all publicity is good publicity, because it seriously backfired on us.
Yeah. I wondered why they didn't come out with their own colored markers, Crayola or something like that.
that would maybe they did.
Maybe they did.
I kept it quiet for tax reasons.
Right. Well, I wanted to get back real quick to kind of wrap up the 70s
Sure.
re-releases real quick. Steve Gadd left the band in 75, and Pete Dyer replaced him on vocals.
It was 74, actually.
Oh, 74. Okay.
Yeah, 74. Okay. It was we were about to record what was to be the Stand Up and Be Counted album.
Right.
And basically when we got in the studio, I think a lot of it was we hadn't been touring so much after Mudanzas.
Yeah.
Steve was writing a lot of material, and it was completely diverse to what we were playing, and I have been used to playing. And when he was bringing his songs along, I guess I was taking a step back and letting Steve show the other guys the songs. And when we got in the studio, it's difficult to explain without sort of pointing the finger, but fortunately Steve and I get on very well, and we've had this out over the years, but you know, things weren't right.
Yeah.
And Steve wasn't happy with the way the band were doing his songs. We didn't feel the material he had was what was suitable for the band at the time. I think he would laugh if he was here, but I think he wanted to be Van Morrison.
Okay.
And it was very kind of laid back, you know, that, and it wasn't really right. So, this is a strange story, because I then, after the initial couple of recording sessions we had, I came home feeling pretty down, and I'm thinking, well, if this is the way it's going to go, then maybe I shouldn't be in the band. And so I said to my wife, do you know what? I said, I think I'm going to quit the band. I said, you know, what they're doing now is not really what I want to do. I just want to concentrate on my songs, really. This is no lie. Within about 15 minutes of me getting home and saying that, Gary Giles phoned me up. He said, hey, Del. I said, what, mate? He said, I don't think I can be in the band anymore. If I, you know, it's not. I kid you not. 10 minutes after, Richie phoned me up. Del, I'm going to quit the band, because if I'm not a good enough drummer, then there's no point in me being in the band. Whoa, hang on a minute.
Hold on, everybody's quitting.
I said, I've just had phone calls from Richie, from Gary and yourself, saying the same thing, and I said, and I've just come home and said the same thing. So what we did was we had a meeting next day. Well, I phoned up Wilf, our manager at the time, and phoned up and said, this is what happened yesterday. So he said to us, well, it's quite surprising, because he actually said that one of the main reasons he signed the band up was because Steve Gadd, the front man. And he was a great man, a great front man. I think if rock and roll history had been different, he'd been up there with the Paul Rodgerses and the Mick Jaggers, you know, and the Robert Plants. But his stage persona was changed. You know, he didn't want to be the front man. He wanted to. Quite often, he was turning his back on the audience, strumming a guitar. And Wolf said, you know, I'd noticed things had changed. He said, I'll tell you what. He said, don't worry about Steve. He said, I'll concentrate on Steve, and he can be a solo artist. And that personally made me feel happy, because I thought, well, okay, he's going to be looked after. He's not going to be chucked out in the cold.
Right.
But then he turned around and said, right, he said, carry on recording the album. So the other two guys, Richie and Gary, looked at me, said, okay. Well, most of Stand Up and Be Counted was going to be the solo album, my first solo album, which Wolf Pine had said to me I was going to make.
Yeah.
So I said, well, what have you got then? I said, well, you know those songs, yeah, record them then. So we set about doing it. Now, Pete Dyer had played with us on a couple, not regularly, but on a couple of shows. Because, as I said, Steve started playing guitar, and he kind of lost a bit of confidence, saying that if he didn't play guitar, the sound's going to be hollow without this other guitar. So he said, well, Pete was a friend of ours. Pete lived in the same street as Steve. He said, we'll get Pete along to play. And of course, I was never the lead singer. Of course, when it came to doing the Stand Up and Be Counted album, you know, it's like, okay, well, you're going to sing then, and you're going to, well, I'm not the lead singer. I'm the guitarist. Pete can sing. He plays guitar. Let's get him in. So, so basically, we started doing the album. I think the first track we did on our own was Smile off of the album. And the next track we did was Stand Up and Be Counted, which was quite a surreal experience, because, you know, from being like the equivalent of like Tony Iommi strumming guitar. There I am in Majestic or Olympic Studios, sat at the Steinway grand piano, singing "Stand Up and Be Counted" with Richie and Gary playing, and I think this is like Let It Be.
Yeah.
It's completely weird,
Yeah.
and that was strange. But I kind of got used to it, and then we started recording in a different studio, and brought Pete in to do that, and it was, I guess I then became the conductor, and I said to him, right, these are Pete, I want you to sing that song. I want you to do that. We'll do some twin lead guitars. We've never done that before. So it sort of it was definitely a new road that we were taking, but still with the melody, and we knew there were people that were fans of Steve's that wouldn't like the band as it was, but after a period of time, people kind of got used to it, and
you touched on two of my favorites. Stand Up and Be Counted, the opening track. It has and when you said "Let It Be," well, it kind of has a bit of a Beatles sound to it.
Yeah.
You can hear that influence.
Hands up, and that's the first time I'd ever written a song to order. You know what I mean? Because Wolf Pine said, when we was having this conversation, he said, right, he said, this next album's going to be called "Stand Up and Be Counted. I want you to write a song called "Stand Up and Be Counted." I went, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I'd never written a song to order before, so that was how that one came about. I mean, that once again, that was, Wolf Pine's influence, on doing that, So that's how Steve left the band. We carried on, and how it changed.
Yeah. And the other track, "Smile," with the orchestration, especially in the beginning, I'm thinking this is ELO. This is yeah. Definitely.
And the Beatles will tell you, hey, they've copied us.
Well, yeah, because Jeff Lynne was heavily influenced, or is, by the Beatles. Definitely. And then I like the guitar work on "Down, Down, Down."
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah. Well, moving on to Houdini from 76.
Yeah.
"Take It Easy." That's a great rocker.
Yeah, we were really getting into our stride at that time. We'd sort of, what I said to you in the early days, the Stand Up and Be Counted period was my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
I was feeling it again when it comes to Houdini. It felt like with Pete in the band, he'd been in the band then for about 18 months, and it really felt like a band, and it just going to the studio to record all those songs, it was, that they were all so easy to do, Houdini and Percy the Pimp, we still do those couple of songs now when we go out and play, and they still go well,
The other track off of the Houdini that I enjoy is "Didn't We Love."
That's that one, yeah.
Nice one as well.
Yeah, once again, a different kind of style, but it's all on the album,
Yeah. Well, that was mid '70s by then, so styles and music were changing too. And then the same year, I guess, "Hearts of Fire." 76. "Lonely Road" is my favorite on the album.
Yeah, that's a powerful song. I've revisited that one again recently. It's got the Mellotron in the background as well.
Yeah, I think that's what does it. Yeah, and I'm glad you guys, brought in the harpsichord, on several of your songs in there as well.
Yeah, just it's something about the quality of certain instruments. I mean, I always associate recording with all the sounds and instruments you use, almost like you've got a paint box and you've got a picture.
Right.
What we've got in the what can we use to color that in? The piano, but it's I'm I'm sort of lost for words now, because it's yeah, that was a fascinating time in some ways, and it was almost like the downfall of the band coming up, because we were playing so well. We knew we were playing so well. We were playing well, but nothing was in our favor. We'd lost a lot of our money through the management company that had folded. We lost a lot of the work we could get as professional musicians because of our association with Charlie Cray and with Wolf Pine. And then, of course, the other thing was, and here's the irony, in the UK particularly, the punk scene was coming.
Punk. I was gonna say. I was just about to say that.
Well,
Yeah.
the bizarre thing was that because we started so young, we were the same age and younger than some of the punk bands.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Really, really weird. And speaking of punks, someone who was a Stray fan who didn't own up to it at the time was Captain Sensible of the Damned.
Of the Damned, yeah.
Yeah, and in fact, he put a little thing on my book.
Did he?
A little credit on my book. And since then I've met loads of punks. I used to come along and see Stray, because while these other bands were playing like Genesis, we were still up there loud, giving it that live, which is what the punks wanted to do.
Right.
But because of how long we'd been around at that time, we were lumped in with the older ones, even though, as I say, the Stranglers were older than us.
Yes.
I think the Damned, Sham 69, the Clash, they were all about the same age as us.
Right. Yeah.
But, it's crazy.
Yeah. It's funny how that
sounded.
But,
it was just everything. The stars weren't aligned for us at that time.
Exactly. Well, originally the original band broke up at 77.
Yeah.
How long after that did you hook up with Leslie West? Come to
that
play
wasn't
with
until about 1999.
Oh, that was more recently. Okay.
Yeah. And that was I'd got about 78, 79. I'd got a deal for a single, which was going to be an album on Gold Records. At that time, they just got Judas Priest, the first Judas Priest album.
I have to say real quick, that was the loudest concert I've ever seen, Judas Priest.
Well, really?
Yes, it was. Yeah, a little.
It was funny because in the mid 70s, I can't remember his surname now, but the guy who was the first manager of Judas Priest, he came along to a Stray gig with Glenn Tipton. And I'd not long seen Glenn Tipton, funny enough, because he had a little 3-piece band called the Flying Hat Band, who were very good. And I can always remember that this Dave manager guy, in his thick Birmingham accent, "Oh, this is Glenn. He's in this new band called Judas Priest, and they're going to be big, They're going to be big." And of course, I thought, "They'll never be big with a name like that." But what do I know? But no, I mean, I got involved with Gold Records, and through Gold, I met Chris Tangarides, who was a well-known producer, engineer. But David Howes, my single came out. It did pretty well over here. And then he said to me a little while later, because we started talking about an album, and he said, "Oh, you never." He says, "You was always known as Stray as a live band, but you never recorded a live album." So I said, "No, we just, never got around to it for one reason or other." So it was David Howes' idea. He said, "Would you be able to get the band together to do a live album live at the Marquee?" Well, at that time, I had like my solo career, as it were, going, and I had my own band, and I'd been away on tour. and Richie, Gary, and Pete had a formation of Stray, but without me.
Okay.
And they'd phoned me up a couple of years before that and said, do you want to do it? And I said, well, no, I can't because I'm committed. And they said, can you recommend a guitarist? Which I did do. I recommended the two guys who ended up playing for them. Their kind of thing didn't work out long term. So I sort of said to them at that time, are you not doing anything? No. I said, well, I've got this opportunity. But that was an odd one because Pete hadn't been playing guitar for a while. So when we recorded the Live at the Marquee album, it was a very odd experience for me because I wasn't really singing. Pete was doing all the singing, even singing the songs that I had sung before, because it was the quickest way to do it. So the album was recorded and released, and it's still out there. Not one of my favourites particularly for various reasons, but
Yeah.
but it went out there, and then nothing really happened after that. I think we carried. I said we did a few shows, and we did a tour in Spain.
Okay.
With a band who were huge in Spain, Spanish band called Baron Rojo or Red Baron.
Oh, okay.
And they were huge. But after that, nothing really much happened for a few years. I went back doing studio work, things like this, and then a promoter in the UK in about 1995, he was putting on a concert, and he asked if we could do this show, and he was also promoting a couple of other shows. And so this was 1996. There was us and a band called Man. You know them in the UK, in the States? Man?
No.
No.
Oh, Man, M-A-N?
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
around. They were around
Yeah.
at the time, sort of all on the circuit.
Oh, yes, Man. Yes, yes.
And so we did that, and there was an agent in the audience, and he called me after we'd done this was Steve with Steve Gadd, actually. Steve and Richie and Gary. It was like the original four. And to be honest with you, there was still old skeletons in the cupboard, and it wasn't a totally comfortable experience. Well, when that finished, this guy Don Mackay, who's a head rhino agency, he contacted me and he said, "Oh, he said I was a big Stray fan. He said I was in the audience at the Riverside Studios. Would you fancy me representing you doing some more shows?" And I said, "Well, I don't think that's going to be possible." As the conversation went on, he said, "Well, how about if the rest of them aren't interested, you call it Del Bromham's Stray?" So I said, "Well, I'll have to. I want to check if it's okay with the other guys. I just didn't want to assume." And so, long and short of it was, the others weren't interested in continuing. So I went out as a three-piece, and that was about 1996. And since 1996, there's been several lineups, but I haven't really stopped since then. And it was through Don that I met Leslie West that you said about.
Yeah.
When he came over about the first time, I think it was in 1999. First time he'd been over in the UK for some years.
Yeah. He was with Mountain, and he was a mountain of a man for maybe that's where they got the.
He was a real character, I tell you.
Yeah, but then
character.
he lost a whole lot of weight in his later years too. But sad that he left us in 2020. I think it was Leslie. Leslie passed away.
Yeah. But I'm sort of fortunate enough to meet. This is another one that I said to you earlier on about meeting people. You didn't expect to.
Yeah.
I would never expected that, and I got on very well with him. And what was very nice was I wrote a song with him, which is on his Unusual Suspects album, and the song is called "To the Moon." If you want to check that out.
Okay, To the Moon. I'm making a note of that.
Yeah, and we were doing an acoustic tour in Europe.
Mhm.
Him on acoustic guitar and me on my acoustic guitar. I did a set and then I accompanied him, and we were doing various solo tunes of his and from Mountain.
Yeah.
And then we had a day off, and we was in our tour manager's house. And I think I was upstairs doing something, I don't know. And then Paul said, "Oh, Les wants to have a word with you."
Mhm.
And the long and the short of it was, he said, "I've had this idea for a song for ages." He said, "And I'm really stuck. I don't know what to do." And I said, "Well, play me." He said, "Paul said you put our tour manager." He said, "Paul said you write songs." He said, "I wonder if you could you help me out?" I'm thinking, this can't be right. Leslie West asking me to write a
Asking
song,
you.
you know. And this is, I said to you before, you know, this is what kind of the surprises you get. But so he sat down and he explained it to me, and he was saying the song's called "To the Moon," and the basis of the song was that he said the song was about him being so hung up and strung
Mm.
out and getting addicted to heroin and all sorts of stuff. And since he became clean, as it was, he realised that all the time he'd been trying drugs to reach something that he could never reach.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the basis of the song. So I just sat down. He played me a little bit of what he had, and I just got adding things to it. And he was sounds a bit corny, pardon the pun, but he was over the moon when it was finished. And then I can always remember, "Hey Paul, come and listen to this. Hey, come and listen to this." You know, and so Paul came down, and there we are in his front room, sitting with the two acoustic guitars, playing the songs which he'd written.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't seem much, but I can remember when he eventually recorded the Unusual Suspects album, and he included that song on it. I read a couple of reviews, and there was one review in America which I consider being a real compliment, was that this particular agent picked this record out, that song out, and he said, "There's something about this song called 'To the Moon,' and it has a kind of a British feel, as if it could have been written with Jack Bruce."
Jack.
I read that, I thought that'll do for me.
Yeah.
That'll do for me. But that was just something that I was really, really chuffed about. And that's the other thing, when you get to know people, they're different from their persona. And I think quite often, and I've found that with lots of sort of well-known people I've met, they feel that they have to live their lifestyle, and they're surrounded by people who tell them what they want to hear.
Right.
Unfortunately for them, I tell it how it is. So I was probably one of the few people who actually told Leslie straight what I thought of him at times, and he was quite surprised.
But I think
so much so he wanted to take me home with him.
Right. I think he respected that. I think he did.
No, well, I know he did. We had we spent a lot of time together, had very long conversations about life and stuff, you know, and he was not the person that people think he is, you know.
No. Well, I wanted to fast forward to 2008. The album Valhalla.
Oh yeah.
Was praised by fans and critics, and it was voted best album of 2009 by Get Ready to Rock magazine.
It was, yeah.
That must have been pretty proud moment. Yeah.
It was, yeah. I mean, that was I mentioned Chris Tangrides just now, and when I first met him in late 70s, he was an up and coming studio engineer.
Yeah.
Of course, by the time we got to 2000 and 2000s, in fact, he was a renowned record producer. You know, he worked with all sorts of people. You know, predominantly, coincidentally, we worked with Gary Moore a lot, which who I knew also.
Yeah.
And I can't remember how, but I met up with him again for ages, you know, and it was like we hadn't spoken to each other for years. And when we got on the phone, it was just like we'd been chatting yesterday. And
Yeah.
he had the same stupid sense of humour as I've got. And he said, "Well, what are you doing? What are your plans?" I said, "Well," funnily enough, I said, "We want to record an album." I said, and he said, "Well, why don't you come and do it with me at my studio?" I went, "Yeah, how much?"
Right. Brass
But
tacks.
but
Yeah.
you know, once we got around the nitty-gritty, we went down there and it worked. It sounded
Yeah.
great, you know, and but once again, you know, we didn't really have the label to back it up again. It was that old story, you know, and it sounded great. It got great reviews.
Yeah.
The production on it, I think, is Chris has done a great job on it. And you know, once again, I was sort of very pleased, proud, if you like, of the songs on there. You know, yeah, but we toured it and toured it and toured it, and until until sort of things sort of ground to halt, mainly because of Stuart Uren, who
Yeah.
he was getting, I don't know, he was just getting fed up with the touring schedules because we were very busy, and
That's hard.
he decided to leave and go off to Spain to live. At that point, I'd had my first solo album was kind of re-released on Angel Air Records, and I also had a new one called 9 Yards out at that time. So I was going around touring that as a solo artist, and also it's not been released, but I've got another album which was just available at the merch desk, if you like, which may well be coming out, generally speaking. And that was like Del Bromham's Blues Devils, and we were doing sort of it was more a blues orientated kind of electric record. So I was doing that for a while. Paul Newcomb, who's my tour manager, he formed his own company, Monstrous Child, and in the background he was getting inquiries about doing some stray shows. And I'd known Colin Kempster, the bass player, for some time, and I thought he would be ideal for it. And also, I'd been working closely with a guy called Simon Ronaldo, who's a keys player.
Yeah.
I brought him in, actually, just backtracking a little bit. I got the original band back together in 2016.
Yes.
And we did a show at the Borderline.
The 50th anniversary. Yeah. Yeah.
And that was the first time we'd ever played Dearest Eloise and Around the World in 80 Days, because I had Simon there to do the harpsichord and the strings and everything.
Okay.
So that was good. Simon also had his own band called Pearl Handle Revolver. But of course, I've been using Simon, and he got to know my songs, both the solo ones and the stray ones. So when we got offered some stray shows, I said, "Simon, do you want to come along and do these?" So it went to a 5-piece band, which is what we've been doing now. And it was going really great. 2019, 2020, 2019 was when Colin first started playing bass. And the shows were going great, and we were booked right the way through to the end of 2020, going into Europe and everything. And of course, then the coronavirus hit.
Yeah.
And March the 6th, it all came to a standstill.
Yeah, right.
And it's only really been in the last sort of year that we're gradually picking up momentum, and that's not just with the band; it's just the venues as well. The whole attitude to the business has changed an awful lot. It's not easy.
Yeah.
You know, on the grassroots level, and so many venues, particularly in the UK, are closing or don't have the money to pay the bands. So it's not easy, but it didn't stop us from recording the album, which we actually did that during the COVID period, you know, we couldn't get together as a band, and I think we were just chatting on the phone or had like a Zoom meeting like this. What would we be doing if we were still playing now? So, well, the idea really was to record an album with the new material. So Simon has his own recording studio.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about it's a little PC in the back bedroom. He's got it's a proper recording. It's a proper recording studio. And so how are we going to do it? Because it's like social distancing time. So I said, well, how about approaching it like you did with your one? I did my last solo album was called White Feather.
Okay, right.
And basically what happened was I had some songs and I went to his studio and I just sat down at the microphone with an acoustic guitar and a click going so that it was in time, and we basically layered the songs, you know. Then we got Karl in to play some drums. Colin had his own facility at home, so he could do the bass guitar from his house. Then as time went on, you were allowed more than 2 people in the studio, so we get 2 or 3 of us in to do vocals or do some overdubs. So it was a longer process than you would normally do, I think. Although, having said that, I've heard some bands take about a year or 2 years just to do it in the normal time. But no, I mean, I suppose under the circumstances, we did very well. And the About Time album, I'm really pleased with it. The different people, you know, it's been reviewed by various people saying it's arguably the best album since the early 70s, you know.
Yeah. Well, you know, I was going to say, because I've listened to it, it almost sounds like it could have been recorded back then in the early 70s. You know, it's got that feel. Yeah.
I don't deny it. I have to admit there was a conscious effort to kind of nod to the past, you know, because we didn't want to disorientate a lot of the fans who've been with us all that time, but we wanted to just do something slightly different. And I think, you know, the songs lyrically, the lyrical content and everything about it is kind of up to date.
Yeah.
Just making it probably sound what a Stray album should have always sounded like.
Right.
Really.
Well,
you know.
well, the opening track, I gotta say, I Am has to be one of the best Stray tracks I've heard. I think
thank you for saying that. And you wouldn't be. I'm pleased to say you wouldn't be the first one either. You know, that one has been picked out quite a lot, and that's quite strange actually, because when we were starting recording the album, I just started writing my book, and the book is called Rock and Roll Survivor, and
go ahead and plug that again. Go ahead and show the book. You wanna?
Well, the book is called Rock and Roll Survivor.
There you go.
That's me.
There you go. And go ahead and tell people where they can get a copy. How they can get a copy.
Weimer Publishing. If you Google Weimer Publishing, they have it online. And also, it's now available on all worldwide outlets like Amazon, and places like that. But if it Del Bromham Rock and Roll Survivor, but I had the song, and I can't remember which came first, chicken or egg on that one, because as I say, the song I guess was kind of autobiographical, but it's also, I guess, what most musicians go through.
Yeah.
You know, they get the knocks, they get the ups and downs, but you know, if you're really committed to it, you just keep going, you know. And you've got to be, you know, I'm a lion, and it sounds. I was very reluctant to write those lyrics down. I thought, is that going to be corny? But I just wanted it to sound dramatic and go with the music. And then with the album title, we weren't sure what we were going to call the album. It was going to be called, we thought of Survivor, but then we thought it might get confused with the American band Survivor from way back when. And then it was at a rehearsal, it was almost like on the 11th hour. What should we call it then? I don't know. And someone, it might have been me, come up with. I said, what about time? You know, time's a good one. And I said, well, yeah, it was kind of about the time we were in, you know, with the virus and all that around. And then just flippantly, oh, well, it was, some people would say it's about time. We had another one, you know.
About time, right?
And I think Karl said, that's it, about time.
Right.
So it's kind of it's a title with a double meaning, really.
Yeah.
It's about the time we was in, and it's about time, you know.
Right. I think it's apropos. I think it is to call it that. I think that's a good title. Well, you know, I want to mention Black Sun is another one I like.
Oh,
and
right.
that organ on that has that Uriah Heep kind of feel to it, which is another one of my favorite bands, Uriah Heep.
Yeah, Simon, he loves all the old classic organists. He you know, Ken Hensley loves that sound. He got to his proudest moment was he got to meet John Lord.
Okay. Deep Purple.
So he's, I mean, he does. I mean, back in the old days, and I always used to like to use the Hammond C3 or B3 organ, and that's what he plays.
Yeah.
And he's just, it was probably one of the easiest things. Sometimes it's very difficult when you write a song to actually take what's in your head and say, this is what I want it to sound like. But Simon knew. He knew. He was right on the ball. He had all the sounds. You know, he did a better job than I could have done, really. And he engineered it and produced it himself.
Yeah. Well, you know, I thank you. I thank you, and I'm sure fans thank you for not mellowing with age. You know that so many in the same boat. You hear their music; it's not bad, but it's kind of like just a generic blues kind of music, you know. And it's like, okay, this doesn't really strike a chord with me, but you're still, like I said, still rocking out. You know, today, just like you did back then, and it's well appreciated very much. I'm sure.
Well,
I'd
like to think so. That's good. I as I say, I think a lot of it's to do with your state of mind. And I just feel, is that the same as I did when I first started, passionate? This might sound another corny statement, but one thing that I have to remember, and I think a lot of people forget, is that when I first picked up a guitar to learn to play it, I didn't actually think, oh, now if I learn to play this at the end of the night, I might get $10 or something. It never entered my head, and so the same thing now is that I write a song, I play my music because it's what I get from it. That's that word priceless that we said when we started. You can't put a price if you're really committed to doing it. It's not about the money. The money is handy, but that's not why I started. That's not why I picked the guitar up in the first place. Thinking how much money I do because I wanted to do it. And even if it all stopped tomorrow, that I wasn't going out to play, I can't see myself a time where at least I wouldn't write a song and give it to somebody else. You know, it's part of my DNA, I think.
It's who you are. I hear that over and over and over again, Del. As a musician, it's who you are. It's got to come out. It's one way or another, and you've got to live that life, no matter how hard it is. You know.
Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah, baby.
Right. Well, I wanted to plug 3 more songs off of the album, real quick. Shout. I really like the beginning of Shout. It has a Middle Eastern kind of influence, is what I hear. I like the instrumentation.
I've always been interested in Indian music. I mean, going right back to my teenage years, Ravi Shankar and all those sort of people, and actually, early Jeff Beck and the Yardbirds. Some of his lines were that, and going back to my Saturday Morning Pictures album. when I did the solo on Our Song,
Yeah.
I had my Jeff Beck head on for that.
Yeah.
I just, what would he do? And
Right.
you know, and I was thinking about shapes of things and all that sort of thing. You know,
Uh-huh.
there's that thing, and I'm probably one of the first people I know that I used to use the drop D tuning 50 odd years ago, because you can get that, you know,
Yeah, exactly.
you know, and which is on shout. That's in the key of D, but I use the drop D on it, so I can go. And even the other one, Living the Dream, on there, which is a bit of a tongue-in-cheek poke
Uh-huh.
at life.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah,
Right.
Michelle, it was an interesting thing, and when I was sort of laid that down with just me and an acoustic guitar, I had to leave spaces. I think
Uh,
this is what should be about here. You know, I want it,
yeah.
and but that works out great. But once again, you know, it's even though we weren't in the same place, we were definitely on the same page, because
Page.
everyone's contributions made it exactly what I had in my head. You know,
Uh-huh. Right.
and that you know, for someone, when you write a song like that, and to actually get it at the end of the day and say that
Yeah.
sounds just like
Uh-huh.
just like I pictured it. You know,
Yeah, just like you imagine. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
isn't it? It's phenomenal to me how you don't have to be in the same physical space, like you said,
yeah.
but to contribute to one product, to one sound, like that. It is.
Well, we're talking on computers here,
Yeah.
mate, but I reckon, like our brains we've got.
Yeah. We got a connection.
There's something going on in there that we can
Something
connect
to go
somehow.
on. But real quick, two more. A Better Day. That's another one that I really
That
really
was
enjoy.
that was being optimistic about coming out of COVID.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was what that one was about. When it first started, there was, well, over here anyway. There was a little bit of doom and gloom. It was like we were
Right.
going to get out of this, and
Right.
then as time was going on, as that it's the human nature, that spirit of human nature. You know, I could sense. Maybe it was just from me, coming from me, but I've always been the eternal optimist. That's why I'm still here playing. You know, and I'm thinking, well, you know, tomorrow's going to be a better day. You know, they might say there's no cure. You know, it's like the invisible, as I say, the lyric in it was the invisible enemy.
Uh-huh.
How
Right.
can you fight it? But we will fight it. We're human beings with human spirit. We'll get through it. Tomorrow's
Yeah.
going to be a better day.
Right. Right. I like
I
that.
think my dad used to come out with stuff like that. Yeah.
Oh, is that what he would say?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and then one last one. I like the mood of sort of Democles. Democles.
Sword of Damocles. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I like the mood of that. That's the
Yeah.
feel of that.
That was almost like an afterthought. You know, I thought the album was done,
Yeah.
recorded, and I just came up with it one morning. I was
Mhm.
sitting here where you're talking to me, and I picked the guitar up. I just had this thing in my head, and
Yeah.
I had to play it. And the more I played it, I was thinking, I'm not sure if this is for the band or if it's for a film theme. You know,
Yeah, right. I can.
and then I started thinking about, I wonder if the next Bond theme is going to be is going to be,
Right.
and I think I'm,
Yeah.
and then I started thinking, stupidly, I started thinking, wouldn't it be great if the next James Bond film is called The Sword of Damocles?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. It would
But that,
fit. Yeah,
but
yeah.
that song was kind of written. Uh, I knew the story, and I wanted to look up the story more, but it was almost like, particularly with politicians,
Mhm.
it's almost politicians. It could be even people in business. You know, people are very quick to criticize,
Yeah.
but it's that old walk a mile in my shoes.
Right. 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 Right.
It's
Right.
based on that kind of story, you know, and that story is supposed to be about the emperor. I think his name was Dionysus, the Roman emperor, and he was in his court one day, and Damocles, in conversation, implied, you're such a lucky man. You've got your wealth. You're the emperor. And his reply was, you never know. There might be someone who's going to stab you in the back.
Mhm.
And so the story goes that you can be me for a day,
Yeah.
but he had to sit on the throne, and he had the dagger suspended above his head, just held by a horsehair. So any time that horsehair thread could snap,
right,
and he'd be snapped. And that's the story of the sword, basically the story of the sword of Damocles. If you look it up on Google when it finishes,
yeah,
there's a whole story of sort of interesting story.
right. Well, that's a good one to leave us with too, to think about.
That's where that one came from.
All right.
And the thing is, like a lot of these things, I don't know where they come from. They just jump into your head. Sometimes it's almost like sometimes I can't actually put pen to paper quick enough.
Right.
It's coming, and other times they're a little bit harder, but they're always for inspiration. And the best ones are always the ones you don't sit down and think about.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, Del. Thanks for all your stories and recollections, and sharing so much, and reaching back, and going time traveling. Yeah, that's always fun.
It's on our time machine.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
Well, I appreciate you taking time as well. So it's works both ways. Really appreciate it.
Yes. Well, I hope it is mutual, because I get a lot out of this too. Just visiting with you guys, and it kind of takes me back as well.
Yeah.
And so well, we will once I get this edited a little bit, shouldn't be much. Then I'll send you a copy.
Okay, that's great.
And then you can post it wherever you like to, and tell everybody about it.
Yeah, we'll do indeed. We'll do.
All right.
Okay, and, we'll spread the word, eh?
There you go. That's right. That's exactly right. All right. Well, Del, thanks so much. So much again. And all the best to you. All right.
Yeah. You stay safe.
All right, I will. And
I hope we speak again sometime.
Yes, we will. And all the best to Stray and all your upcoming shows and recordings and everything.
It looks like it's going to be a busy year, and onward and forward.
Yes, right. Yeah. Never look back. Always look forward, right?
Yeah.
We were looking back.
Well, that's another song title, isn't it? Don't Look Back, which is on the Move It album.
Yes, exactly. You got it. All right, Del.
You take it easy, and I'll see you soon.